Welcome to Brainthropology. Let's talk about our amazing brain and the issues that get us stuck. We all have those moments where life gets overwhelming. It can be related to injury or illness, or an issue with your kids, or just because life is crazy and we need a little help and encouragement. Our team of therapists, expert guests, and clients are here to deep dive into the topics that matter most. We will share information with our listeners that encourages, educates, and empowers.
This episode is brought to you by Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center, helping clients live their best lives by implementing strategies such as those discussed in this podcast. Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center is located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, serving southeastern Michigan for in-person and community-based services. Out-of-state virtual and teletherapy services available for OT, PT, speech, mental health, and mindfulness. Check out their website at galaxybraincenter.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Brainthropology. I am your host, Courtney Wang, and I am here today with TBI survivor and warrior goddess, Alice Boss. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. Alice is a survivor of not one, but two different brain injuries. She has fought her way to a place where she is today. I've had the privilege of working with her through both of her injuries. I'm honored to have Alice here with us today because I know that her story will resonate with others and will help them to not feel alone in their struggles. I also hope that her story will encourage you as well. Before we get started, we always like to start with a positive. Alice, I would love to hear a positive from your life.
I am always so happy and excited to be able to go to see live music, and that has been something that's been really important for me, and it was very important during my recovery period, and we'll get back to that and how that happened. So I'm glad always to go see a concert, and next week I'm going to see the Gorillaz and The Who. So that's on my most recent concert schedule. So
yeah, I know all the concert schedules for a long time because I was working with you. My positive is being here with you today because I have seen where you started, and the fact that we're here right now, it's a huge, huge milestone. And I know you're doing a lot of other cool things that you've been hinting at and you haven't even told me yet. So I cannot wait to hear those things.
Secret, but I'm going to tell you today. I'm super excited.
So, Alice, first, I want to thank you for joining me. I know talking about all that you've been through and how challenging your brain injuries have been can be very emotional. What do you hope our listeners will gain today from hearing your story?
Thank you for inviting me. I know you've been asking me to do this podcast for a while. I haven't been ready. And, that really boiled down to like my confidence, really, being re-emerging as like a new kind of version of self. And so, it's been a long journey, but I think that some of the stuff that we'll talk about today that have been helpful for me, that you have taught me and that my medical team has taught me and that I apply will be helpful. And I want to give people hope to dig deep within themselves to be able to know that they, give it time and put the focus on getting better, and there is an other side, no pun intended.
And that's awesome because I think there's a big place out there where people don't have resources or don't have connections or know where to get help. I know you and I met through someone else that you were working with at one point, and that's actually how we originally got connected.
Yes.
But it's hard when you don't know where to start. And I even have physicians on my caseload and other medical professionals, and they've gotten lost in the system. So it can be really hard to navigate. Now, I called you a warrior goddess in the opening. What does that phrase mean to you? Because it's something that you and I have used to refer to each other and to your other team members. But what does that mean to you?
Yes. So I'm glad you reminded me of warrior goddess, because today couldn't be a more perfect day to talk about that. Early in my second injury, I realized that I was really in a very difficult acute state. And I really felt like I was like in like what would be perceived as like a trench, like in a war, and most of my medical team was female. And so I just started calling my medical team warrior goddesses, because I knew that I needed help. And, just reaching a hand out going, please, can you help me? How, like, I need help, but I don't know in which way I need help, and that was kind of like the beginning of my journey on the second injury. That's how I ended up like in your office that day.
Yeah, I want to tell people a little bit.
Yeah,
so we met
backstory.
originally through your social worker after your first injury.
Correct.
And that when we were working back to return to work, can you tell people a little bit about what your life was like before your first injury?
Sure. So my life previous to the first injury, I was a full-time community college professor and also a high school teacher. And then prior to that, I was a professional chef. I have a master's degree in hospitality and graduated top 2% in the nation in all disciplines. I've presented at international, conferences with white paper work that I was working on. Helped develop and write after-school learning center grants that are still functioning today within my community, and got those implemented, and really was very active academically. So worked on bringing our department from Web 2 to Web 3 and online, creating online classes and things like that. Doing work with the state of Michigan on articulation agreements between high schools and community colleges for accelerated credits for high school students who are exceptional. So that's what I did prior to my first accident. And
what did you do socially? What were your big social activities and hobbies?
Doing art, taking care of my family, gardening, going to concerts whenever my schedule would allow, so that was, but I was pretty busy. I was a pretty busy person. I would always, teach extra classes and do extra things all the time. So.
Yeah. And it sounds like that was a really fulfilling part of your life.
It was huge. It was amazing. Like my work was just sort of like, it was like my drum beat, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm helping people realize their own personal potential, and giving them the tools to do so, and introducing them to the resources to be able to do so.
Yeah, it was what we were working on in our first round of therapy after your first injury. We were 100% focused on return to work. And one of our goals was building up your stamina for work.
Yes.
We were going through and working on just some organizational strategies.
Yeah.
So I would have considered your first brain injury relatively mild as far as
very much so.
Yeah, brain injuries
comparatively, yes.
Yeah,
now in retrospect, for sure.
People who looked at you on the street would have had no idea. We ended up writing a job accommodation letter as we worked together, asking for some accommodations for computers and breaks and that kind of stuff. But it wasn't major asks that we had.
No, it wasn't. It was just more to structure it so that I could have the most durability within that environment.
Right. And we were very confident you were going to succeed with accommodations at work. It was something that we both were confident in.
Yeah. No issue there. Yep.
And then you had your second brain injury in 2019, Christmas Eve.
Yes.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about the experience right after that injury, or would you like to kind of have me describe it for you? What's best for you?
Well, you're going to have a different perspective because I lived it and you saw it, right? And it's hard when you're living through it to actually see it in the way that others, we hardly ever see ourselves how others see us anyways. Yeah, we're always like, oh, you think I'm that way? I never knew that. That's crazy. So it's, so for me, the second injury, before I even left the emergency room, I was already having onset of sensitivity to light and sound. It was just really a slow roll from there. It just got progressively worse. over time. Not only did I have physical injuries, but I had internal head injuries as well that were very significant. It was very catastrophic, the second one. And then, I remember the very last thing you said to me before you released me from care the first time. You said, there's one thing I just want to caution you. Try your best to not get another head injury. And you were right.
Yeah, it always breaks my heart that you had to find that out, because it's something that I have experienced in my career. I've not read research or tried to find out more about it, but it's been very real for me. People who've had concussions earlier in life and then get one and come and see me, they usually recover a lot better from the first one, and the second one can be that big challenge.
Well, I'm no spring chicken either. I mean, just for full disclosure, I'm 58. So, and I had 2 injuries within 3 years of each other. But the second one was far more catastrophic. It was cataclysmic for a life shift. Mm-hmm. I was never going to be a teacher again.
And that was something that I think it's great for them to hear what you felt from the inside, and then what I saw as someone, because not only am I your therapist or was your therapist, but after I have people who discharge from therapy, frequently they become friends. Mm-hmm. And I know that you and I have been able to maintain like a friendship, and we text and check in on each other and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. When you walked into my office in early 2020, I think I saw you a few weeks after that accident.
Yes, you did.
And I literally didn't recognize you when you walked in the door. You had your hair, you've got beautiful long hair that's always in like a cool braid or something else. You were using that as a shield. It was your shield from the world. It blocked out light. It blocked out everything else. You were unable to sit up straight, and you had to have your hair over your face as you were looking down at the ground, because that's all you could handle. And I think Mr. Darcy, my dog that was in the office, came up to you under your hair, but I think that was overwhelming for you.
Yes.
Because everything was overwhelming in that moment.
Yes. Yes.
And you confessed to me that you had not been able to brush your teeth.
Correct.
Wash your hair was painful.
Correct.
And the more you and I talked, I had a really big fear for you because you weren't able to do things that were going to keep you alive, like eat meals, shower.
Correct.
You and I decided you asked me to come with you to your doctor, your primary care doctor. Mm-hmm. And I did something that I was a little nervous about. And I've told you later how nervous I was, but you did not know in the moment.
No. I did not.
I told him that I thought you needed massive intervention, like an inpatient stay, so that you could be safe again. And you are amazing. You advocated for yourself, and you're like, I will do anything. My life, I have things that are important right now, and I cannot do that. What do you need me to do? And we built a team again.
Yes.
And we decided together, you had gotten so overwhelmed because of the pain.
Yes.
That it shut down your whole system. Mm-hmm. And you're very holistic, anti-medication.
Yes.
But we said, we really need you to take a pain medication to start with.
Yes.
And you said yes. And that really changed things for you. Can you describe how that changed your situation in that moment?
Yeah. So, when I brought, I had somebody actually bring me to your office, and you didn't know that I was going to show up there. And, it was like the first time I had actually like really left my house since the collision and the second head injury. And I said, I got to go and see her, because she's, I got to go see Courtney, because she's going to be able to know how to help me. You had helped me in the past, and we had, and so, yes, I was not able to have eye contact. I could not go fast in a car. I could not be around noises. It took everything out of me to leave my house and to confront all those sensitivities to be able to try to get the help, to reach out to get the help that I knew that I needed. And yes, I did not know about the intervention. That was surprising, but I brokered a deal. And one thing that I wanted, and that's kind of what you're alluding to, because I did not want to take pain medication, but my body was stuck in a trauma loop. And so the only way for me to be able to get better was for me to break that loop of pain and that trauma. And so intercepting that neuro loop was important to be able to start my journey, to be able to be here on this podcast with you today. So I appreciate you doing that for me, even though at the time I was like, what the heck, like I ain't going anywhere. And I was like, Courtney, I've listened to everything you said. I have everything I need in my bag. I'm like, look, I can take notes. I can do this. I'm like, I'm a smart person under here. But I'm like, I needed to be in the safest place that I felt in this universe. And that was my home, and my medical team allowed me to be able to self-advocate like that, because I knew I was going to be able to, I'm like, okay, I'll take this medication if you let me stay at home, and I'll do whatever you tell me to do if you let me stay at home. And so that's kind of how it worked out. And, so with the guidance of a very good medical team and, them taking me through the steps, even though it's taken me 3 years, I ate the same food for a year and a half, the same 5 things. It took me a very long time to even just go to my own mailbox on my front porch. I needed to have people with me, to leave my home. But yeah, that was an intense moment for me, Courtney. And I sort of realized what was happening at the time, but that's a lot to try to negotiate through.
Yeah. And I only think that worked because you and I had such a good relationship
previously.
And you knew that I came from a place of love and respect.
Yes.
And that was only something I would have done if I was truly, I didn't tell you in the moment how freaked out I was on your behalf. And so now you and I have talked about it, and it's emotional for us.
Right.
But that was because of our mutual respect for each other.
Right.
That went well, because it was never something where I was forcing you into a situation, but it was the only way that I could figure out how to get you the right help. It was either take some medication to get you through this hump,
right,
or it was to get you in a different safe place so we can figure out more stuff.
Right. So, right. So I wasn't doing my ADLs, I think is what it's called.
Oh yeah. That's our jargon for it. You weren't doing your activities of daily living.
Right. I wasn't.
Self-care.
No.
Cooking.
I think I went 10 days without a shower. And the first time I got into the shower, I cried, even though I had used the shampoo 1,000,000 times in my life. Mm-hmm. It was just so overstimulating between the smell, the feel on my skin, my whole sensory system was just unbelievable, dialed up, I guess. I don't know, how to say it. Maybe there's a medical.
Yeah, I think my theory for you is that your system was so overwhelmed with the pain and everything else that you could not cognitively process sensory input. So instead of it feeling like shampoo, it was any information just felt like a needle or something hammering in on you, and you perceived it as a higher level of pain.
Yes.
And that's why you avoided those tasks, because it was pain.
It was. Anything vibrating. I remember my neighbor doing something so lovely and beautiful, and he brought the snow blower in front of the house to move away some snow in that winter. Mm-hmm. And it was my mind was at war with the snow blower and the vibrations and the sound, vibrations and light and stuff. The first time I remember putting shampoo on my head, I cried. I felt like I was giving myself a chemical burn. Yeah. I literally cried in the shower, but I knew I had to do it. Mm-hmm.
Now let's go through and say what our goals were. So we had baby goals in the very, very beginning, and those were to eat different meals. Well, eat actually was the first one, and we went super simple. We set up your protein bars and the
Yes.
different things. You had some of that already set up, and we expanded that just a tiny bit. At the time you had aid care.
Yes,
And
I
so we
did.
set up a weekly routine where things
Yes.
needed to happen on certain days to start to reintroduce basic daily habits. And this was after that pain medicine had worked, and
Yes.
the world was not comfortable, but it was tolerable, I think, at that point.
Right. You know, it was sort of like, okay, I wanted to be able to just stay in my bed for the rest of my life, like in, dark curtains, and just, I was not interested about anything outside of my home, period.
Right.
Just I didn't care.
And
I was safe inside. I had this notion in my head that if I stayed inside my house, I was safe. And I really I had such conviction about that notion. I'm not leaving. I'm not safe out there because every time I go out there, I get hurt.
Well,
It was just very simple survivor logic, but it wasn't logical.
Well, and you and I had the bonus challenge of COVID hitting in
right.
March of 2020.
Yes, that's true too.
And one of my big fears for you at the time, and I told you out loud, was if you stayed in a place where you stayed in your house forever, if you stayed in your house as much as you were, then that might become a lifelong habit if we did not start doing some exposure therapy.
Right.
So you and I tried to get creative, as you have to do in a pandemic and life as an OT. And we put in our earbuds, and I brought my dog, Mr. Darcy. It's actually still on my phone, the picture. It's one of my background pictures.
Oh,
I
is it?
haven't even
That's
told
so
you that.
cool.
You're on my phone.
That's amazing.
And we would go through and we would walk on opposite sides of the street, because it was beginning of COVID, where you were like, people will kill you, stay away.
Right.
And we walked on opposite sides of the street with our earbuds, and I talked to you as we walked very basic routes and that kind of stuff. And that was one of our goals as well. But what was your big, big goal? What was the penultimate goal we've worked towards this whole time?
So, so once I got over the notion that staying inside my house was the safest place for me, because I had this radical realization as I was starting to become more desensitized, I guess is probably the way to kind of say it, desensitized to the world around me. I realized I could trip and fall inside my own house too. So I might as well go out there and go out there and do the things that I love. And I love going to live concerts and live music. So I just said to Courtney, I really want to work to being able to go to live shows again and be able to travel. And I was having difficulty just being inside of a Costco, nothing against Costco, just like that environment, like a big warehouse type space. And, and most concerts are in warehouse type spaces. And I'm like, man, between light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, warehouse spatial sensitivity, I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to see a live show again.
And spoiler alert, you're back to being a rocker girl.
Yes, let's go. Definitely.
Well, and it's interesting to hear that where you started, where you had to hide from the whole world behind your hair.
Yes.
So we started with simply talking and finding out what was causing you to be so overwhelmed. We took a little action that was a little medication. And I don't want to sound like I push medication all the time, but sometimes it's the right choice in the situation.
Well, I was resisting it, and it wasn't helpful to me.
Right.
And I can say that now in retrospect, it was the right move. And, when you have 5 medical professionals standing there having a discussion about your condition, I'm still in there. The me is still in there. And that's the weird thing, because it's who you were before your accident is still in there. It's just going to emerge as a different flower, the seed of yourself is still present, so, but you have a medical team, you have to trust and rely that they're experts in what's going on with you. So there has to be a level of, okay, you should try to want to help yourself get better.
Yeah, and finding those allies on your recovery path is huge. So huge.
Yes.
So we went from talking about that pain medication, and then we went for literally just the block around your house for walks. with us on opposite sides
Yeah,
of the
that
street.
was funny. We'd talk on on our phones, be like, you stay over there. Like, I don't want to get close. But it was a thing, but we worked it out. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we worked it up to where you ended up walking almost 5 miles a day, pretty independent. I mean, very independently with your dog.
Yes.
But your dog was very helpful for you in that process.
Hugely helpful. I still kind of anchor on him quite a bit. Especially if I'm just walking around my local town, or I want to walk with somebody, I still kind of tend toward that. Mm-hmm. Still have a little anxiety around, social anxiety, a little bit around that. But if I'm going from my house and getting into my car and going to a destination, then I don't feel it. But when I'm just like out and I like, it's like, I don't know. I don't want to say it's a protection thing, but it's almost like a companionship thing. And maybe in my car, I'm listening to music and I don't know. It's just different. It's a different feeling of vulnerability, I think.
And I think you can be a tool of grounding for you.
Yeah.
The way music grounds you because you're so musically inclined.
Very much so, yeah.
I mean, and the grounding tools that we used for some of that anxiety, you were fun. You were saying, I got to pull all the candy I keep in my pockets because that's one of the tools that we did for when you got really anxious.
Yes.
Even on those walks was you keep something that can pull you back into your body.
Yes.
And so that has been something that's been helpful.
It's been huge. Yeah. Like a lot of the tools that were taught to me that really resonated with me. I actually kind of, not to derail, but it is something that you kind of taught me early on. Keeping track of keys is like a thing. And yesterday I was doing something and I wasn't really being as mindful as I should have about my car keys. And I thought I had misplaced them. Like I threw them with the garden debris or something like that. And I'm like, dang, I really hope I didn't lose track of these keys. Like, I don't want to dig through all that garden. And I actually went in the house and I looked around, like maybe I threw them on the table, which I don't normally do. But do you remember a long time ago, you said, hey, just whenever you walk in the house, throw your keys in a bowl. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, guess where my keys were, Courtney?
In a bowl, like you were trained.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's just little life hacks, and I think really the way to kind of think about it is like, look, you're emerging as like a new, I don't want to say a new self, but you kind of are, you have to say goodbye to the old self and you have to say hi to your new best friend and you have to get to know your new best friend of self.
Yeah.
And so, life hacks are really good. So yeah, my keys were in the bowl. Thank you.
Awesome.
I carry around candies or gum. I'm not chewing gum just because I don't want to be smacking on the microphone today. But that helps me keep pretty focused. But yeah, if I'm feeling like I'm getting overwhelmed or maybe there's too much going on in the space that I'm in, if I have a cinnamon or if I, a peppermint or something like that to kind of bring me back to self. Mm-hmm. That doesn't sound like much, but if you want to try that, I think it might be helpful. Essential oils are super important. I carry around lavender. Mm-hmm. I use that as a tool. I carry around things that might alert people in case if I become in a state where I'm not able to articulate, they can look inside my wallet and, contact the people that need to be contacted. That hasn't really happened to me, but I've had things happen that might have triggered something for me. I've had things where I've called you on the spur of the moment, oh, this happened. And I'm I don't know if I'm handling it or if I might be having some kind of response to it, and you've talked me through some of those things. So I carry those tools around with me. And I use them to my advantage to be able to get back to the goals that I want to have now, which is enjoying live music and stuff. So, it took me a, slow process like that to be able to make my way out of my house and, feel confident. For a long time I had other people driving me, which was probably the right thing. Mm-hmm. Because I wasn't ready cognitively, sensory, I wasn't ready. Vision therapy that I've had with Dr. Carter, which I want to give you a huge thank you for suggesting and referring that for me, because that's made a huge difference. for me, as far as like how it's helped me feel more confident in my personal approach of self to the world at hand and the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the pieces come together to get you back to concerts, which is that ultimate goal,
Yes.
right? So it was
Yes.
the walks, the tools for grounding.
Yes.
You have sitting on your iPad right now one of the communication tools that we had. So
Yes.
the very first concert you went to, was that the Kiss concert?
Yeah, my goal was to go see Kiss, and I had seen them before, so I kind of knew what to expect. And of course, Kiss Army, woo,
And this is a high sensory moment. There are lights
Yes.
flashing and all this stuff. And so we
Yes.
came up with strategies of, this is a time where it's okay to wear your hat if you need to wear your hat. Try to position yourself. Try to tell the people the ushers at the event, let them know that you might have a disability or that you have a disability and you might
Right.
need assistance, and then tell them what you would need them to do to assist you.
Yes.
But then we came up with a communication card that
Yes.
says, hello, I have a brain injury. These are the things you can do to help me.
Right. And so it's such a strong tool because it also is like, if you get into a situation, it also has contact information, and this is what I love about the tool. I can use it or not use it, with any of them, and the key is to always have something in your quiver, that you can pull out as you need it and make it so that you can be your own warrior, goddess, or whatever you want to call it, to be able to get to your goal. So I went to Kiss at a venue I'd never been at before. I had studied the venue. I had looked where my seat was at. I read everything up about the venue. I knew where I was going to park. I knew the route that I was going to take. I knew that I needed to save up my cognitive reserves for, my own excitement for the moment. And so a few days prior, I didn't do my walks at 5 miles. I was more like, let's dial it down to like 3. And, I kind of just sort of took it easy coming into, the activity itself. I left early, so it gave me time to like feel comfortable. I wouldn't be panicked that I'd be missing like my ultimate goal. It was a good process. I self-advocated. I arrived early. I let one of the ushers know about me being present. And I said, I do not foresee anything, any reason why I would need help. But in the event, I just want to let you know I'm in the building, and they're very cool. And they checked in. And then, in fact, on my way out from the show, they actually asked me how my experience was and how did everything go. And, so it was a success. But, I had to do a lot of prepping. And in my life before, I'd just be like, oh, I want to go see Kiss. Even at the second injury or the first injury, like, I'd be like at 5:00, I'm like, oh, I want to go see Queen with Adam Lambert. And like, I would get in my car and like drive to Detroit, get a ticket and go see the show and think nothing of it, and that would be after working all day. And that was after my first impact. So, the second impact, it was a really long, long journey to be able to get back to that space for various reasons.
And it was a long journey. That's where I want people to know how much hard work you put into this. You dedicated full-time energy to this.
Yes.
Your second accident, we ended up applying for disability together and going through that process.
Yes.
Being able to organize and run and do all the work part, that stuff would still be challenging, but our goal shifted once we looked and kind of saw the situation and realized that work was not going to be what you were going back to.
Right.
We went to what is quality of life. And
that was hard. That was a really hard thing to really just accept, and really I had to dig down deep because it's like, I couldn't remember how I was before the first accident. And then, I know how I was after the second accident, and I returned to work successfully. And, but after after the second, the Christmas Eve accident, we started to have we had to have those difficult conversations of like, you're not going to be the kind of teacher, it's not like a broken bone that's going to heal.
Right.
And once you understand that enough, and I just had to come to the realization I was not going to be able to be the teacher that I used to be able to be, even, the day before the second accident. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I feel like there are the stages of grief to go through whenever you realize you were the job. You were a mom. That was important. You were the job. Those things were core to your identity, and having that have such a fast, sudden shift, it's loss, it's grief, it's a trauma. It's all of those things.
Major.
Yes.
Major. It was just, I don't want to say it's a fall from grace in a way, but it kind of is. But then again, I didn't want to return and be not, there was no return after the second one. Let's just be honest with that one. For me, there was just no return. But it didn't mean that my self-worth disappeared, or my value to society. And that's been the biggest challenge, in recent times, what is the purpose now, and how do you contribute to the greater good of humanity, because I'm used to that. That's kind of like my person arrow vibe, so I got to stick with that.
And so what are you doing now? I feel like this is the part I'm getting excited for.
I know. So in December, I really got this notion that I really wanted to learn how to day trade. Okay, so the second accident happened Christmas Eve. And ironically enough, so I had tickets to go see Billy Strings, who's a very amazing artist, bluegrass artist, Grammy Award winning, from Traverse City, Michigan. And I had bought tickets for that New Year's weekend. And I missed that show. And so then the pandemic kind of happened while I was in recovery. And I had given those concert tickets to my sons. I'm like, please go enjoy these concerts. I'm sorry I cannot go. And they understood. And so during the pandemic, Billy Strings, I think in February, might have been, I don't remember which year, but it might have been February of 20. So I don't know, maybe later. But anyways, I got hooked up into watching him stream one of his concerts during the pandemic at the Capitol Theater, I believe, which is where the Grateful Dead also had a very long run in the 70s, and he did them on the same days. And it went across Twitch or Reddit or something like that. And so I'm like, heck yeah, I'm not going to miss that streaming show. How do I get to this Reddit, Twitter, Twitch space? So that's how I ended up sort of thinking about Web3 and stuff. So I kind of want to speed up. So I got on Twitter, then I was hanging out on Twitter. I'm like, I got this notion in December of last year. I want to learn how to day trade, because it would give me a challenge. There were some Twitter groups I was hanging out in. And then I started learning about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and doing some stuff in crypto, and really just kind of just checking everything out in that whole space. I'm an AMC GME. I aped in. I'm a Wall Street bets digging in my heels. So, this speaks to my lifelong, I don't know. What do you want to say? What's the personality trait where somebody is kind of I don't want to say combative, but we don't accept things that aren't.
Well, the casual term is stubborn.
Well, okay, yeah, stubborn. Yeah, that too. That's funny. But there's a phrase. But anyways, regardless. So, that tenacious, I'm going to go down swinging kind of attitude, and I've always been like that. I've been a punk rocker since forever. And so, it's just my vibe. But anyways, so I ended up in this trading group. Then I got involved in NFTs. And then I started really learning about Web3, which we're on the precipice of now. I'm starboss.eth on Twitter if you want to come and check me out. Hopefully by the time this launches, there'll be a link tree and other stuff there. But I have really learned so much in Twitter, and I think Web3 offers a great opportunity for people who might be homebound to still be able to carve out some sort of way that they can engage with humanity, even if they can't maybe leave their homes, So I'm working on a project. It's crumpetqueen.eth. It started out as like a joke because, one of these Twitter spaces I hang out in with a group of people, we all own this NFT project called Apocalyptic Apes. It's like a derivative from the Bored Apes. And it's like this whole, and if you follow music, Snoop Dogg and Slim Shady Eminem like just released a video with their Bored Apes, and then they became the ape avatars at the end, right? And this is what will lead people into like Web3. So we're on the early end of it. So I really want to try to like get in there and get going with the project that I'm working on, which started out as a joke to my friends in my community, but has actually kind of taken on a life of its own. So I have been working on an art project, crumpetqueen.eth. What's happening is the more I learn about Web3 and the more I'm connecting with other artists in Web3, there's like 3% of the people doing NFT projects are female, and the rest are, male driven. And so there's a lot of female artists who are bonding together, who are trying to cross support each other, who are doing different kinds of art. My art will be project driven because my ultimate goal is to be able to create a metaverse space for neurodiverse people to be able to feel safe and where they can learn about Web3 with vetted, trustworthy people, because there's a lot of sharks out there that would take advantage and, look at new people coming into Web3 as chum, and they're out there. So you got to, it takes a while to find the good ones. So at this point, I have somebody who has emerged as a developer who's willing to support me. I have an artist who's going to be the architect for my web environment in space in the metaverse, and I'm trying to position myself so that I could at least get a piece of a metaverse land, so that I could create a meta club that would be inviting and welcoming for everybody, but in particular with the focus on encouraging neurodiverse people who might be stuck at home or physically stuck at home, but for me, just creating an opportunity for a safe place for people to come and learn about Web3 and engage in Web3 and immerse yourself in like a world that is still safe, and that's like another dimension of your own space within your home and within your own home safe space. And the ultimate goal would be to be able to, if through my art purchases, that it will help organizations place people with, I would love it for people to be able to get Oculuses put in their hands so that, so that they can have a VR experience, so they can come into the metaverse space that's being created. And so it's early days. I have people behind me. I have really smart people who are tried and true in the Web3 space, and just know that there's opportunities for people to be able to reemerge. So I really want to take the skills that I still have in my person and myself now, and be able to try to still, I don't want to say teach, because I want to share the information so that people have options. Because when I was laying curled up in the ball, and just dealing with like all of everything, my physical injury, the severity of my second brain injury, I really questioned like my own self-will to like live for probably a year and a half.
And that was the bottom, right? Like that is an experience that I think a lot of people who have been through a major injury will relate to, when the world feels like it's only hurting you, when the world does not feel safe.
Yes.
And when anyone feels that way, if you hear this story, we want you to know that there are ways to help the world feel safe again, step by step.
Yes.
Moving forward. And I think what you just described is describing the term warrior goddess again, because you're not done on your journey. You are going through, you are still working on yourself every single day, but now you're in a place where you are making sure that all the things that you have gone through are going to help others.
You got it.
And that's
100%.
And this is why we love each other, because we know that together, all of this stuff can help everyone else. And that's why we are here today.
Yes. And the biggest message I want anybody listening this to know is you are not alone. You are 100% not alone. However you figure that out, however it resonates with you, I just need you to hear me right now. You are not alone. And there is room for your new self, because the world is huge, and there's so much opportunity, and there's a lot of people. The more I hang out and talk to people on Twitter and stuff like that, and talk to people all around the world at any given time, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of unbelievable recovery stories. And I just want anybody listening to be reminded that that can be you. If you put in the work on yourself, you have to be your own best friend. You have to fight for it. I put my nose down so hard. I treated my recovery like my full-time job. And it literally was. It literally was for a very long time, maybe a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Or more, actually. It was longer than that, wasn't it? I can't remember, because, one of the things that's beautiful that I can't remember some things, but other times I'm like, dang, I should have wrote that down.
Yeah. I mean, we are in fall of 22, so it was intense for
a long time,
over a year and a half.
Yes.
And then you and I, as we wound down our therapy time together, and you know that I'm always available if you need things.
Absolutely. My whole medical team is.
Yeah. But we gradually decreased and building that space. And that was hard for you.
It was really hard.
I could see it in your eyes. I could hear it in our conversations.
It was like, dang it, I'm not ready. I felt like I wasn't ready. But everyone's like, oh no, you're doing great. And I'm like, no, I'm not. What do you mean?
But then
self-doubt.
The self-doubt.
Self-doubt.
But without kind of giving you just a gentle, just go an extra week this time. And the one thing that I see a lot of other professionals do is say, all right, twice a week now we discharge, like we need to be done.
Right.
And that is not the way I like to end therapy. I generally try to go to once a week, every other week.
Yes.
Once a month, and then as needed.
Yes.
Not all insurances let us do that, but we were grateful to be in that auto system. And I think that allows you to have that safety net, because it really is just like those walks that we did. You just needed a safety net, something there that you knew that it could be okay.
I felt so vulnerable to like everything, my sensory journey, and then just like my social journey. That was like a whole nother layer.
Right.
You know what I mean? Can people tell when I talk? Like I know I'm different, like my own self-presentation of self, like, oh, like I wasn't like that before. Like that's weird. I just like did that, So, or controlling tics. I had some tics in the beginning, social tics that were really not cool. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't control them really, I had to really practice on controlling them. So it's been a huge upload. It's been a long, and a lot of that, about some of that. Yeah.
A lot of that was exposure therapy. And the ultimate goal of exposure therapy is making sure that it's a small challenge that will end well.
Yes.
And we had to make sure for your brain to feel safe again, that we would go out. And that's why we so gradually built it up. I mean, we walked a block for over a month and a half.
Yes.
And it took that much time for your brain to say this was safe. And I remember I talked to a little girl with a dog, and you looked at me and you said, Courtney, I'm so jealous. I want to be able to just talk to a little girl like that again.
Right. Yeah, that was a profound moment for me. So she's like, this little girl's just like walking her dog, skipping down the road, happy as Larry, just like, woo-da-doo-da-doo, and just like blissful in her just self and her freedom and her joy with her dog. And I had felt so trapped, in my own self-preservation mode, even with having like the safety of Mr. Darcy, whom I love very much. I still think about a therapy dog maybe in the future once my Yoda has moved on. But yeah, I was really, and you went up to her and you were talking to her and you were just having conversation. I was just like, that whole moment just struck me just so hard. And I'm just like, I have got to find my inner free, inner girl. I need to find my inner girl with her dog cruising down the road, and just like, I need to get on with my life. I need to be able to feel bullish enough on myself. Trader talk there, bullish enough on myself to be able to be my own best friend and capture that and really carry that with me, and just be like, well, if the little girl can walk her dog by herself down the street, why can't I? Mm-hmm. And it was just like a weird comparison moment, but I needed that moment, and I needed that gradual therapy and that time to be able to get desensitized, just because that was what was happening with me physically and mentally.
Right.
And there were things that were happening simultaneously. So, and then my vision was a whole other thing. And
we'll invite you back when we do a vision podcast, because that was a big piece of your journey. And it's very common in brain injury to have vision issues.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap up and ask you one last question. If you could give yourself one piece of advice on your recovery journey when you were early in that second injury, what would you have told yourself? What's that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Wow. So I read that question. I was like, I wanted to marinate on the questions and the topics that you wanted to talk about. And that one, I just kind of like, I'm a Virgo with the Taurus rising. I was a very high performer, which I expressed early in this session. I want to get so much done so quickly, and there's just not enough time, and I do this and do that, and kind of taking like a hard right or a hard left on that kind of level of self-performance. I was in good physical condition at the time of the second accident, and it's like trying to be patient with yourself. And the biggest thing is just, you have to wait and be patient and know that your hard work will pay off. It will pay off. And be willing to be daring with yourself, like dare yourself each day to do something that you might have been avoiding, like the pile of unopened envelopes sitting on the table, and also really, music was a huge thing for me, even listening to music. Exercise was a huge thing. Even though I ate the same stuff, I didn't even have hunger pains. That was really, the crux of a lot of it. I still have textural issues and things like that. I still don't eat as well as I should, but, I take a multivitamin now. I didn't do that before. So, really caring for yourself, being bullish on yourself. But, don't expect miracles overnight. Listen to your medical team, take your medication. There's very smart people out there who understand what's going on with you. always ask for help. Always ask for help if you know you can't do it yourself. And it's okay. Like, don't let your ego and pride get in the way of asking for help. And if the first person you ask can't help you, ask them if they know anybody who might be able to help you. Or keep asking until somebody says, hey, you know what? I can help you. We have to know that if we don't ask, the answer is already no. And we've already self-defeated onto our own journey forward. So we need to remember to feel okay enough to ask. And, I ended up with my social worker because I knew I needed help, and that's how I found you. Mm-hmm. And, you've helped me tremendously through both of these journeys, and I'm honored to be here today. And I thank you for letting me come and talk about a little bit about my journey. I look forward to coming back and talking about how impactful the vision therapy was for me and how it helped me in my day-to-day existence. But yeah, it's been a hard but good journey, and I want to be able to continue being able to help others. Even though I'm in a different state of self, I think I can still do some good. And I want people to remember that you're heard and you're seen. The universe knows you're out there. And, just find your tribe and, lock hands. Let's go. Let's go is really what I wanted to say, but, beep.
Alice and I read a research article on the therapeutic benefits of cussing. So it was always allowed in our therapy sessions. And we were joking today that it might slip up here.
I've been trying really hard not to. I've been self-editing really hard. So if I see my, a little stumble, because I really I want people to feel, if you're in a bad spot, I want you to feel excited to know that, let you know that there is a future for you and to not give up.
Well, Alice, I really want to thank you for being here today,
welcome.
Being vulnerable. I know that this is not an easy conversation, but it's a needed conversation.
Yes.
And to our listeners,
yes,
be courageous and move forward in your day with hope, joy, and purpose.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Alice.
Appreciate it.
While we love what we do and are as passionate as they come, the information on this podcast and discussion is for educational purposes only and should not replace professional medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare provider if you are seeking medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment for you or anyone else. We do our very best to provide correct information, but please understand science and medicine is ever-changing. We welcome feedback, comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. This disclaimer applies to any guest or contributors to the podcast or blog.